Hey guys, welcome back to DIY Dudes. I'm Drew, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install luxury vinyl plank flooring. So I'm in a 900 square foot house, and I'm going to be installing this flooring continuous throughout the entire house without a single seam. So let's get started. Okay guys, so the first and probably most important step of any floor installation is the surface prep. Before you get started, you're going to want to go through, scrape off any little bits of drywall mud off the ground, any paint splatter, get it as clean as possible. And if you can, use a vacuum because then you know it's going to be 100% clean. In addition to that, use a level or a straight edge, whatever you have, to go around and check for high and low spots in the floor. I'm using a 6-foot level to get the best result. Use a 4-foot level, whatever you have is fine. And you can see here I have a gap, about a 1/4 inch gap at the transition between the flooring in the closet and the flooring in the living room. So rather than cut a small piece of plywood to fill that gap, I'm going to float a little bit of thin set mortar to level out that gap and eliminate the change in height from one room to the next. So that technique can be used anywhere. You can just apply the mud or the tile mortar wherever you need it and just thin it out. Just feather it out as you go from whatever height you have to 0. Just try and get it as smooth as possible. So alternatively, if you have a spot that's too high, just get a belt sander or an orbital sander, whatever you have, and try and sand that spot down as best as you can. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the underlayment. So a few of the basic tools that really help this process along are a regular stapler and red tuck tape, or really any sort of tape. The idea behind that is the stapler is going to help you secure the underlayment in place around vents, and the tuck tape is going to serve the same purpose and make sure you get a nice strong joint. So I'm going to start at one corner of the room and work my way to the opposite corner and just roll it out and secure it as I go. So whenever you do come across a vent, just roll the underlayment right over top of the vent and then cut it out with a sharp knife afterwards. Typically, most underlayments come with a built-in tape seam, like I'm using here. For butting two pieces together, make sure you have the pieces lined up exactly, and then use red tuck tape to secure the joint. Alright guys, so now that I've established my layout, I've gone ahead and I've pre-cut 3 different sizes of flooring plank. So this is 1/3, this is 2/3, and this is a full-size piece. And the idea behind this is you want a randomized pattern throughout the entire room. You do not want to have 2 planks line up with the joint matching on either side, because it's going to be very unsightly and not the look you're going for. So after you've got these few cuts set up, you can go ahead and just pick and choose from these sizes throughout the entire install, and you should be good to go. I've gone ahead and I've cut a few pieces of scrap flooring to use as my spacer. I'm going to use these to make sure I have a consistent gap away from the wall. I've taken one of my random cuts. This is a 2/3 length piece. And this joint is actually a click-in-place joint. So what that means is I'm going to take a scrap piece of flooring, use my rubber mallet. The flooring's just to add some extra cushion. And the joint just snaps in place. So the first row is actually a little bit difficult. It's not going to be 100% in place until I get the next adjacent row in place. And that's because this piece can still slide up and down. It's roughly set in place now. I'm going to install the next plank and then make sure this seam is 100% perfect and all the joints are closed. Starting the first row properly, make sure you have consistent spacing throughout your entire room. So take your time and put in a little bit of extra effort in this space, and it'll pay off throughout the rest of the run. So line the tongue and grooves up. And then I like to fold it up, and then you just kind of roll it gently in place. So now I'm going to take my next random size. This is the 1/3 length piece. Same thing, just rock it in place. And now here's where I want to set my spacing against the wall. So this piece is actually, it's probably fine. It's a little bit further away from the wall than I would like. So I'm going to adjust it. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my tapping block. I've got the click side, it's going to lock into this click. I'm going to gently set it in place. And I'm gonna use my pry bar to tap this one back down more towards the wall. Key is when you're doing all this tapping and setting in place, just be very gentle. You don't want to break any of these tongues or grooves. And then as you're going, make sure that you're checking the tongue and groove to make sure no damaged piece of floor is jammed in there. That is going to make it so your joint doesn't set, and it's going to create a lot of headaches for you because the joint's not going to be set. You're not going to be sure why it's not setting. You're going to end up ripping out a big section. So just check it as you go. Make sure the joints are clean, fully intact, and you shouldn't have an issue. This piece isn't sitting quite right and the joint's not sealing. So I'm going to show you guys how to use the tapping block to make sure that this joint is tight, and you're going to want to address these immediately when you see them. So I've got my scrap piece of wood. I'm going to insert the tongue into the groove. And it's not going to be sitting quite right because this piece is a little bit further that way. So I'm just going to use the tapping block and my pry bar. Perfect. So that slight tap just closed up the gap and made sure this edge is continuous all the way through. For a big flooring job like this, it's best to bring in a partner for help.
The one great thing about vinyl plank flooring is you can cut it easily with a utility knife. You don't need any big power tools.
All right, so I've come to a point where because of my cabinets, I actually have to work my row in reverse order to get back to the wall. So all I've done is I've gotten to the point here where I know I'm gonna end up having to work backwards and just rock the tongue and groove in reverse order. Now that you're back square with the wall, you can just carry on your run, same as you did off the start. When you come across a vent, I like to measure the piece in place. You can see I'm just measuring the edges of the vent with a pencil and then using a straight edge to mark a clean straight line. Okay, so I'm running into a problem here where my walls aren't actually square. This is probably due to the fact that this house is 80 to 90 years old. You're probably gonna come across this in a lot of older houses. So rather than try and twist this piece to work around the wall, I'm gonna make sure to cut a sliver lengthwise off of this entire piece. The reason behind that is if I start trying to fight the floor against the wall, it's gonna throw the rest of my floor out of square, and I'm gonna end up with a lot of open joints and it's gonna look terrible. So best thing to do is not fight the wall, rip a little strip off of this piece, and it should solve your problem. So to cut the board along the entire length, scoring it with a knife probably isn't gonna work. The best tool to use is a table saw or a jigsaw. So I'm in a situation here where I can't rock the piece properly into position because of the obstruction caused by the piece of door trim here. So I actually need to set the piece down flat, and then I'm going to use the pry bar to slide it right into place without rocking. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that right now. So now that I've finished laying the floor in the main room, I need to transition into this series of smaller bedrooms. And one obstacle that I'm gonna come across in order to transition into this area is I need to take into account the fact that I have a wall that's gonna cut into the width of my flooring piece. So I don't want a gap in between the main room and this area. I want the floor to transition seamlessly throughout. So I need to take into account cutting out the width of the wall that's gonna intrude into my flooring plank. So there's a series of measurements I'm gonna do in order to figure out how much width I need to take off of that piece in order to keep my joint spacing continuous throughout the entire area. So use a scrap piece of flooring to maintain your joint spacing. Just set it in place, get your laser level, and line up the laser right along the edge there. So that laser is going to project all the way across the room on the far left side to where I want to start. And I'm going to measure the width from the laser to the wall to establish how wide of a piece I need. Now that I know my width and I've cut all my pieces along the length of the wall, I need to tie in the flooring from the hallway into the main room. I'm simply marking out the door frame onto the piece of laminate floor, and then I'm going to cut out for the perimeter of the wall so I can tie in the piece. So those are all the basic steps for installing laminate vinyl plank flooring. I simply repeated those steps throughout the remainder of the house. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more content.